Hello, my name is Amanda Rodriguez, and I am employed with the Educational Service District 105. I am an Education Advocate 1. Right now I am the lead, working with a total of 8 education advocates under the Student Support Program under Emily Nelson. And my specific area of expertise is working with adjudicated youth. So when we talk about adjudicated youth, we're talking about students who have been in the criminal justice system, who have already been charged with crimes or about to be charged, coming from juvenile facilities, juvenile detention centers, drug and alcohol facilities, helping those students transition back into their communities, either finishing their education, looking for job training, also outsourcing students to community providers so that way they can become successful in their communities and in whatever they choose to do. I've been doing this for 13 years.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Taylor Tequil. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Program Director at Rod's House. I have been at Rod's House for 4 years in the fall, and I would say that my area of expertise is case management and outreach services. How that applies to a lot of you here in this room is case management always takes into account meeting the young person where they're at and some of the barriers that they're facing in terms of their family unit, their housing unit, their education and employment goals. And I'm glad to be here today, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Dan Crispin. I'm the Chief of Police in Selah, right next door here in Yakima. I came to this job about 2 years ago from the Criminal Justice Training Commission, where I was the program manager for Initiative 940, or LATAXA. For those of you who have been getting the emails on the compulsory training, that's all coming out of that office now. I've sat with many grassroots community groups for the last 5 years as we started to develop WAC 13911 and 13912. And how to interact with our communities in a different way. And so I bring that to the table today, and happy to talk about some of my experiences with people across the state.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I talk loud. I'm Quinn Dolan. I am an attorney in town. I'm the executive director of Yakima County Volunteer Attorney Services, which is a legal aid nonprofit organization here in town. Additionally, I take juvenile panel defense cases. I was a juvenile public defender for about 3 years. I was a prosecutor before that for the county. I currently prosecute in the city of Wapato and defend juveniles who are charged with crimes as needed. So I would say my area of expertise is criminal law, but you know, it runs the gamut.
And that's good. At this time of the convention, day 2, we need someone to talk loud to wake us up anyway, so thank you for that.
Hello, my name is Dulce Diaz. I'm with the Yakima Police Department. I've been with the department for almost 17 years. I'm currently assigned to Eisenhower High School as a school resource officer. So I started out on patrol. I was a school resource officer at a middle school for 5 years, and then I went back to patrol, did gang unit for a few years, then to special assault. And then I got the opportunity to come back as a SRO, and I really enjoy being a school resource officer and working at the schools and with the students. We had 7 SROs. We're down to 2, so we're kind of spread out pretty thin right now. But I really enjoy it, and I think it's very important to have officers there in the schools here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lupe Martin, and I've been an officer for the Grandview Police Department going on 22 years now. Spent 10 years on patrol. Next several years I spent in detectives, basically doing child crimes and things of that nature. Then I had the opportunity to move up into the SRO role, where I've been for the last 7 years. And unfortunately, that's come to an end, and I'll be promoting for sergeant here in a couple weeks.
Unfortunately, you're getting
Sorry,
a promotion.
Chris.
Yeah, that's terrible. Well, for those of us who have worked with you, that is unfortunate, right? But congratulations. Thank you, Lupe. So the first question here is to start painting the picture. When this original legislation was handed down, as many of you know, it was focused exclusively on law enforcement, on SROs originally. So this unit is left over from that, but I know we need to expand the definition of this particular training unit from bias-free policing, really, to bias-free school safety and security. But the way the unit is described, it does use the term bias-free policing. So let's expand our definition, at least on that basis too. So let me ask the panel, and whoever feels inclined to start, feel free to pick up the mic. What does bias-free policing mean to you? Who would like to start? All right, Dulce it is.
All right.
What does bias-free policing mean to you?
So to me, it means just, treating everyone the same, regardless of their demographics, regardless from where they are, what situation they're in. Me working at the schools, I used to work at an alternative school, and so we had students there that had, we had a higher percentage of students that had disabilities, mental health issues, homelessness. And then I go to a different school, Eisenhower, and so the demographics there are a lot different. But it doesn't matter where you're at, it's just treating them the same and giving them the same opportunity, the same resources, and just trying to make their life better and kind of trying to lead them the way. So it doesn't really matter, what the background is, where they're from, whatever it is just helping them the same.
I'll go next. So for me, I think I would say we're all biased, right? Everybody has a bias. And so bias-free policing or bias-free anything, right, is being cognizant of what those biases are and making sure that you're checking them constantly. And also, certainly there's plenty of, outside of this training, there's plenty of books that kind of discuss biases, but the reality is you can't treat every kid the same. They're not the same. They're not coming from the same backgrounds. And some kids are going to have bigger issues with school security than others, right? And that's not necessarily about you. That's about what they've seen. That's about what their family structure is like. And to me, it's gonna be taking the bigger, being the bigger person, taking that step and overcoming that student's biases as well when dealing with you. But the reality is we all have a bias, right? We all have that kid or that adult that we just sigh if we have to deal with them, right? That's a thing. So I don't think we can, I can't say I'm bias free. Absolutely I am, but it's just constantly just checking those biases and trying to be like, why am I reacting this way to this person or this situation?
So just to paraphrase, one of the definitions of bias-free policing or school safety is to admit that you have bias. Okay, thank you.
I think there's a national discussion going on right now in multiple disciplines, but I think especially in policing, we should keep in mind that we can get easily corrupted or polluted. I don't know, corrupt is such a hard word, but kind of polluted, right? Especially, I didn't say I was an SRO in my career as well. I worked in the schools, and then I ultimately supervised the SRO unit at the department that I started in. And I remember those days. It's back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. But going into a classroom and having a teacher come up to me and say, Johnny needs to be, something needs to be done with him. He always acts out. He is constantly, rubbing me the wrong way. So those are the things that sort of pollute our optic when we start dealing with Johnny. What I've heard repeatedly across the state and even in some national venues is that sort of school to prison pipeline that gets propagated at the onset when a teacher says, this is a student who is a problem. And then as the SRO comes in and says, okay, well, you got my attention, Johnny. And then Johnny goes to the next grade or to the next school. And what do we do in law enforcement? We go, hey, watch out for Johnny. And so that's a sort of bias that I think, at least under the optic of our community, there are people out there that are watching for that, and we have the ability to control that at the school level in law enforcement.
Thank you.
When I first got this question over email, something that stuck out significantly to me was that there's such a drastic power dynamic that happens with SROs in schools. SROs are the people with the badge and the uniform and the car and the power, right? A lot of the students who are interacting with SROs know that this is a person in power. This is a person of authority. So in order to help shift that narrative of this is a person in power, this is a person of authority, they can get me in trouble, it's very important to recognize that there is a power dynamic in there, whether you're aware of it or not. The students, the young people that you're interacting with, they know it's there, and they know that they are the person in the lesser power dynamic.
Thank you.
I had some time to think about this, and despite all the notes that I've made, I come down to two significant sayings that I do talk with students about a lot, coming from juvenile prisons and detention. When we try to make decisions on how to get through things that sometimes trigger us or make us feel a certain way through life experiences. And one of the things I always talk to my students and families is we're only as great as we allow ourselves. And through that meaning the learning curve, again, the biases that we carry, acknowledging that we have biases. When we do have biases, what kinds of triggers does that initiate within ourselves? And to be mindful. In this career, I've been really emphasizing the dialectical behavioral therapy skills that a lot of our students who come from JRA prisons have been doing for 20 plus years, talking about mindfulness, meditation, how to calm self, how to feel safe within self. And, just understanding that sometimes when we talk about fairness, one of the biggest things that comes to my mind is equitable doesn't mean fair. Equitability does not always mean fair. And it's just Ms. Donlin was talking about is every situation is going to be different. And we have to acknowledge that, every student, every family, every situation might have some things that are in common with another case or family, but it's all going to be different. And so if we can recognize that within ourselves and constantly check ourselves, and again, like I've heard constantly through the last couple of days, is it can get exhausting. But as long as you're willing and able to confront your own biases, conflicts of interest, all these things that happen within our small communities when dealing with people we may know, or we know families, and I've heard about you, or I've heard about your, all these things that really come into play when we're dealing with our families, taking a step back and just analyzing, how can I do this different? How can I take this situation, and again, be better at it? So that's how I look at that.
Thank you. That's one of the things I really love about this panel discussion is just the collective experiences and the wisdom. I mean, that's a great start, at least, on laying out the basics of bias and how it affects us. I love that notion that it's tiring, right? It can be exhausting to dig into that. Did you have something else to add to that question, Lupe? Yeah,
I'm just going to add that, when I first started my career as a law enforcement officer, it took me a while to come to the realization that I started gaining all these biases because of the people that I was interacting with. I felt that they were blaming me or yelling at me or labeling me for whatever reason without really getting to know me. And it took me a while to realize that, it wasn't me that they were lashing out against. It was my uniform, it was the badge that I was wearing, because I can guarantee you that if I wasn't wearing my badge, my uniform, and I met this person at Safeway or whatever other store, we would have a decent conversation. And it took a while, and I'm kind of glad that when I went into the SRO position that I had already done away with that aspect and that mentality, and I was able to move on from that. So
I think that's actually a good segue to question number 3 here, too. So maybe you can speak to this. Because of all the life experiences and what you're describing, right, you've all had interactions with this particular topic. So I'm going to ask you to think back over your careers and your encounters and your time spent in your field, and think about some ineffective practices, some examples that you've seen maybe that you can resource and share with us of some things that just did not work. Maybe it was something that was entrenched in the community or the culture of where you worked or the school or the agency or wherever, but just some examples to lay out there of things that may be still prevailing wisdom or whatnot, but just things that you've seen that just do not work, that have not been effective. Any of you?
Well, for as far as demographics and things like that are concerned, in Grandview, we're 90% Hispanic, if not more. So being a Hispanic officer, it's really difficult for me to say that I've struggled in that aspect of it, because I've understood my audience. And I think a lot of the times is you don't really understand who you're working for. But that was, I guess, one of the biggest negatives that I could probably take away is maybe the schools utilizing me as a scare tactic type thing. I spent 7 years and I've established a relationship with, basically at this point in time, it was the 5th grade to the graduating seniors this year. I've known them since 5th grade and so on. Because I was teaching 5th grade, I was teaching 6th grade. So I really got to know my students up until COVID, and then things kind of slowly died down. But I established that relationship with them, and sometimes they would utilize me as, which is common in our culture as well. Put on your seatbelt or the cops are going to take you to jail and things of that nature. And you see that a lot in our community as well. But likewise in the schools too, so.
Thank you. Other examples? We don't have to go down the line. Just put your hand up if you have.
I mean, I've been a juvenile public defender long enough to have some really bad examples. So I had a client who was charged with assault 3 for assaulting the SRO. And the police report read that, it had been like this altercation that, I don't know, he made some flippant comment in lunch line. School calls the SRO comes out. But the video, right? God bless videos. The video showed that, my client, who had been being a smartass, sure, but nothing like super bad, is walking out of school with other students when the SRO pulls up, and the SRO gets out of his car and beelines it to him. And my client took, 2 or 3 steps back, and the officer grabbed him at his collar and his belt buckle and put him horizontal in the air and slammed him onto the cement. And the only time my client made contact with the officer was to reach out and grab him while he was midair, right? That's the only assault. Needless to say, the prosecutor dismissed that case. But my point is, that was something that did not go well, right? And that kid is done trusting officers, right? He's done. He was represented by me in the criminal matter, and he had some legal aid people in the suit against the school and the school district. I don't know what happened with that, but the reality is not just him, but his siblings and his family, right, are all impacted now by this complete and utter distrust of somebody who grossly, in gross disproportionate response to what had happened. And then, because the cameras are still rolling, right? While my client is down on the floor, you can see the officer speaking with other officers, and he's like reenacting what had gone down, right? So if that's how you feel about students, if you take delight that you had to spike them to the ground, get out of law enforcement and definitely get away from the schools. Right? Because you're doing nobody any favors. So that's probably the worst example, but that's my example.
I think that addresses the question. Thanks, Quinn.
I'm just going to tag on to when I came into SELA PD, I sent a little pamphlet ahead about philosophy, and there's a book called Good to Great by Collins, if you've read it. But one of his principles is get the right people in the right seat. Don't just fill the seat with a warm body. And unfortunately, don't you see that a lot in policing? It's like, what are we going to do with him or her? well, let's put him in an SRO position, or let's put him in an admin position for policy development or something. But when we do that, we're just transferring an issue from one part of our agency to another, and I've seen that happen in the SRO jobs. We'll put him in the schools, get him off the street because he's not safe on the street. So get the right people in the right seat, and I think we're going to be a lot further ahead. Did you have a question?
As a comment, I think I like what you said. I think that plays true to all fields, even teaching and administrative issues. I mean, I know you guys are taking a beating up there, but that's really key in our early childhood development, that we have people who are really responsible for that education component in the classroom to be the right person in the seat as well. So,
Agreed.
Thank you. Taylor?
So at Rod's House, we do case planning, and that is making sure that we are helping the young people in the best ways possible, and we're addressing their barriers and their needs. And something that absolutely doesn't work, our age population is 13 to 24 years old, is telling them what they're going to do, and telling them how they're going to do it, and telling them when they're going to do it. That never works. Young people need to be invested in their own success and their own, what they view as their own success in their own case planning. So telling someone, especially a young person whose brain is still developing in all kinds of sort of ways, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, we're setting them up for failure at that point when they're not invested in their own futures.
Thank you.
Working with a lot of students, a lot of families throughout the county, I've, again, realized that wherever I go, we may have a lot of similarities because we grow up in these communities, but every community has a different way of living. And so working in 9 multiple school districts throughout the Yakima County over these last 13 years, I just come to realize that I really have to become more aware and mindful of the communities that I'm serving. The way things function in Yakima will not function the same way in Sunnyside, and what happens in Sunnyside will not be functioning the same way in Wapato. And it's like that as we get further and further away from Yakima. And so just becoming really invested of understanding what your community is about, how they do things. There are really a lot of champions. When I say champions, people who are invested in their communities to help our kids if we're just willing to find out. And understanding that, a lot of the students or kids or families we work with have labels. A lot of us get a lot of information from other police officers, school districts, administrators about this kid did this and we have to watch this. And those are really good information to hold on to. At the same time, these students come with labels, the families come with labels. And being able to overlook those things, be aware of it, be conscious of it, but not allowing those labels to be the reason why we're acting a certain way or how we're responding to our clientele or our students. It makes a huge difference. A lot of our kids are very observant, like many of us are, why we get or do well in these positions that we do, because have a lot of similarities. We've been through trauma. We've had these triggers. And so do our kids, so do our families. And so just becoming very aware of that and not putting more labels on kids or families who already have these. An example, I've worked with many students who, didn't like Mexicans, didn't like people of color or a BIPOC community, but allowing just to have them a place to say things without taking it personal. It's okay. Maybe you don't want the help today, but I'm leaving the door open because maybe sometime down the road you might want to come back. Maybe when you mature, things get different, or unfortunately, sometimes a lot of our kids and families hit rock bottom and they don't realize they don't have to. But sometimes one of the ineffective ways I also see is that we do a lot of trauma bonding. And one of the things that we work on with our education advocates is to stay away from trauma bonding. A lot of us, again, have similar situations that we grew up in, but they're different. And so a lot of our conversations are now, I understand that must have took a lot for you to survive, but let me talk to you about how to thrive. Let me talk to you about how we're thriving now, how I'm doing it. Kids, again, they think they know everything, like a lot of us sometimes do as adults, and we need to find a common ground. And sometimes that's just having a safe place to be able to be themselves and not judge them on maybe things that we've been through that we did differently, that if I did it like that, I wouldn't have done that. So really just being open and at a non-judgmental stage when you see new clients or new kids, just to take it for what it's worth and learn at that moment, be there with them. Because if we do that, it becomes ineffective. And then, we close off those conversations. And the kids are smart. Families are smart. They feel that. They know that.
Thank you. Dulce, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add on to that. Thinking about the examples that were provided and connecting that with what Amanda is saying, the behaviors that are landing someone in the principal's office or needing to come talk to an SRO, those are a symptom of something else that is going on. It is very, very rarely, if ever, that particular incident that is what caused that behavior. So some kind of a comment that was made in the lunchroom, wherever it was, that then led to something else happening. There was something else going on. And if that need was met for that young person or for that student, they probably wouldn't have reacted in the way that they did. So the things that you are seeing that are behaviors that are troublesome, those are symptoms of other problems. Those are symptoms of unmet needs. So.
Thank you. Dulce, did you have something you wanted to finish us off here before we move on to the next question? Thank you.
Okay, so as an SRO, not only do I work for the police department, but also, I'm at the school district, at the schools pretty much full time. So I get to, I work with the police officers and teachers and admin and all of that. So I have to wear many different hats to be able to communicate and to be able to get information and to be able to help, students, staff, whoever needs it. And so I've seen, firsthand officers that have become SROs that are great or not great. But you have to be able to shift gears, very quickly when you're at a school. And I've learned that over the years to be able to do that effectively. And there are officers that can't do that. They're so focused on patrol or whatever else it is. They don't know how to do that, or they haven't been trained, or whatever it is. But I've also seen it with teachers. We have great teachers, and then we have the not so great teachers. But our jobs primarily is, number one is safety, making sure everybody's safe there at the school. And number two for me is, to provide resources. I love it when students come to my office and say, hey, I'm having an issue with this. Okay, here you go. And it's easy for me to get information. I find it very easy, and I'm not afraid to call people, ask questions, and most of the time I get a good answer, which is helpful for everybody. And I wish we could all do that. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And that really helps to bridge the gap here between that question and the next one. So we looked at some of those examples of what doesn't work, right? Where we failed, where things have broken down, and where we're not doing the best job that we can. So some of you have already alluded to some of those solutions and things that work. I know you're all positive, upbeat people, so it's hard to talk about what's broken without talking about how to fix it, right? So let's shift gears a little bit and build on what Dulce started to share there and what some of you have already sort of hinted at too. What works? What examples, what physical, tangible programs, examples, actions, whatever, what works in addressing this bias issue? What works?
I think what works is relationship building, right? Recognizing that these are young people that you need to have a relationship with. And that's not going to be real fast. That's going to be something you build over time with trust. And I know it's been a while since I've been in high school and early college, but I grew up in Moses Lake, and we had an SRO there who was beloved by the kids, right? They would see him out I was a waitress after high school, and they would see him out at the restaurant, and they would just clamor. They would invite him over to their table. But that was work that he did, right? That's work to build those relationships. But I think in the long run, it made him a better SRO. It made the relationships more effective. It kept those kids safer, knowing that someone cared and was watching. I think that helps. I think also one of the things that Taylor said was recognizing that it's just beyond this one issue, right? You're seeing a symptom. And one of the best books I've read recently is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And I would recommend it to everybody here. But Dr. Bruce Perry interviews for the FBI, does child forensic interviewing for the FBI. And it is all about brain science and recognizing that somebody may be reacting out of trauma and it having nothing to do with that incident. And so I would encourage SROs and school safety members to really try and say like, okay, but what happened to you, right? As opposed to what went wrong, what did you do, why are you reacting like that? Let's peel back the layers of the onion and see if we can get some meaningful trauma support for some of these kids.
Quinn, you don't know this, but we just came off a 1-hour session on trauma-informed interviewing, and guess what?
Dr. Bruce Perry.
I don't think he mentioned that resource, but what happened to you? Awesome. Yep, very good. That's exactly the question that we're instructed to use, so awesome.
I'll take a different approach to this. From the administrator position, I would say that what works is to have a clear set of expectations going into your role. Understand what you should do and what you shouldn't do in the schools. Because my experience, if I go back a step, is some of the failures occur when an SRO does something that they aren't or probably shouldn't do, right? It's not our role to discipline children. It's not our role to discipline students. But have you not been invited into that circle before as an SRO? You know, when a teacher is maybe at their wit's end and what am I going to do, and have the SRO come in and do that. But if you have those clear expectations, know what your job description is and know what you're going to do in that circumstance, right? How many of us have been brought into a teacher's office or a principal's office and the drawer is opened and, hey, we have confiscated all of this paraphernalia from, would you get rid of this for us? I mean, why wasn't I called on the front end? If it's drugs, if it's paraphernalia, if it's weapons, you know, let me do my job on the front end. Don't take up pass a hat or get a bunch of collections and then dump it on my desk and then want me to do something with it. Oh, and by the way, officer, that Johnny that we've been dealing with, most of this stuff is his, right? Well, which stuff, you know? So I mean, that relationship building, that understanding of what your role is, what your role isn't in the school, I think is what helps get us to success.
Thank you.
Definitely recommend what happened to you. So now you've heard it again. Definitely pick up a copy. Involving somebody in their own success, I'm going to go back to that, is incredibly important because that's what creates that investment in themselves. And having a wraparound approach to what a student or what a young person truly needs requires their voice. So if you're having meetings with the teachers and the principals and the parents or whoever their adults in their lives are, but they're not sitting at the table, are you actually having a meeting for them or are you having a meeting about them? You have to involve their voice in what they perceive as their success. And it's not going to be the same thing that you think is going to be success, but it is their life. They are making choices, and their choices are probably what have ended up in meetings about them, why there's a meeting about them. So at that point, you might as well involve them. And relationship building is priceless. You cannot get that back, especially after that trust is broken. It's so hard to bring a relationship back to a place that it once was. So you might as well start from day one with accepting students and accepting and embracing their differences and their challenges and how unique they are. Especially because young people like to bring a friend and bring a friend, and they also like to exclude a person and exclude a person. So if you're cool to them, they are going to say that you're a cool person, so you'll be cool to their friends. That's how school works nowadays, I'm noticing, which is cool. So be someone that they like and be authentic with them. They can see through you when you are not being authentic. So spend the time to build the relationship from early on, and it'll probably make your job easier in the future and involve them in their own future success.
Thank you.
So I guess the best thing I can just piggyback off what everybody's saying is just the relationships. You know, doing this work throughout Yakima County has been one of the biggest things that I can fall back on. Is if I don't know something, I learn. And that's the biggest learning curve that I have still to this day, is that if I don't know something, I'm going to acknowledge it. And if I acknowledge that I have a lack or a hole in my learning, how can I provide what it is that's missing. And I think that's also true to a lot of our professions, is sometimes we get into this rigid black and white thinking that I know it all, I don't need any more learning, I've done what I need to. And we're all in education, which is a very unique position, even for SROs, is to find out what your school buildings are doing. What is their multi-tier system supports? What kinds of things are being offered in your particular building that can help you outsource to your students or to the kids that you're working with? Being very knowledgeable about what your school districts are providing to these kids, that you maybe just say, you know what, I might not be the right person right now to help you, but let me find out who is that person. One of the biggest things is our education advocates really do our best, because not every student's going to fit our caseload. Not every person that referred to us is going to be able to be helped by us. But we really don't like to leave students just hanging, or families saying, you know, I'm sorry, we can't help you. We really do our best to find out who can. Again, because we don't always presume to have all the answers. And to acknowledge that is one of the biggest things that I've seen in the kids that I work with, just to say, wow, she actually acknowledges that she doesn't know everything. That's pretty cool. That's pretty safe. I think I can do that too when I'm ready. Because again, growing up in these communities, we grew up really fast. We grew up so fast that we didn't realize what we didn't know until we got into the situation. And then when we got into the situation, it was like, now I'm upset and I feel shame and disconnected because I don't know this. But a lot of our kids, our communities only know what they know. And so if we become mindful about that, as well as mindful about the things that we still need to learn and know that we still have a learning curve and we can change that, that gives permission for others to do the same. So I really like that when I work with students.
I actually had that added to my business card. I don't know anything. Yeah, it just saves a lot of time.
So I do agree with the building a relationship, not only with students, with their family, with their teachers, you know, as many people as you can, and be consistent about it, you know, and being out there and talking to kids during lunch, you know, in between classes, after school, before school, just being there available, and the students seeing that, I mean, that's a huge help. Just to get to know the students and getting to know their background. And that way it's just, it helps me to understand the students better and what kind of resources do they need. And so just building that relationship with them, I think it makes a big difference.
I'm going to push on this one just a second, too. We talk a lot about relationship building, but we're also talking about bias, right? Because there are people we all have readily admitted who we see eye to eye with, and there are people we just don't like for whatever reason. Maybe it's our bias, or maybe it's just our day, or whatever. But as we continue to address this question, I want to challenge the panel to just think about, and you guys to think about too, what are some tactics or strategies you can use to build relationships with people you don't want to build a relationship with? So you don't have to answer that question.
I mean, as far as that's concerned, I mean, I was privileged enough to teach the grade program. And I mean, I have to teach it to every single student. Fifth grade, I did 6 weeks, and in the sixth grade, I did 13 weeks. So I got every walk of life. And at first, you know, in their fifth grade, as the second I walked into their classes, you know, they'd kind of look at me wide-eyed, and they'd just kind of follow me everywhere because of their past experiences. I don't know what their past experiences with law enforcement was before, but I know what I could do as far as how I wasn't there to change them or force them into liking me. I was going to be me, and they were going to see my actions and judge me by then. At the end of the sixth grade year, I'd throw them a big party, and then these kids were coming up to me afterwards and joking with me and things of that nature. And some of them wouldn't even call me officer anymore. And that was something that I wouldn't hold them accountable for. If they wanted to call me Lupe, they can call me Lupe. And that was the type of relationship I had with them. And it was funny because you'd get a lot of them that would come up to you and be like, you know what, you were scary and this and that. But it wasn't me necessarily. It was the uniform again and things of that nature. And afterwards, it's like, if we would have known that you were this type of a person from the very get-go, you know, but these are the types of relationships. And again, you know, going back to it, I was there for 7 years, and it takes a long time to get buy-in with these kids to the point where, and I'll throw this example out there real quick. I was standing in front of the doors there at the high school greeting the kids in prior to class. And I had 2 students walk up to me. and they wanted to talk to me about something. And I said, yeah, sure, can it wait? I said, I'm waiting until the school bell rings, and then I can reach out to you later. No, I need to talk to you now. Okay. So I said, why don't you wait for me there? And like 2 seconds later, I had a second juvenile come up and, hey, I need to talk to you as well. And I was like, okay, well, this is odd. I said, what are the odds that 2? Okay, well, let me talk to him first, and then I'll talk to you. And so I brought him into my office and said, hey, Officer Martin, I've been thinking about killing myself. I'm like, okay, all right, why don't you hold on to that thought real quick? I said, let me close the door, and I sent a message for the other kid to wait because this was going to take a while. So I talked to him for about 15 minutes and got him in touch with the United Families counselor that we have there that's been hired through our school district now, and got him taken care of. Then I had the other one come into my office, and wouldn't you know, the exact same thing. And I'm just saying that, we have 4 counselors at our high school. And the fact that, and a mental health counselor on top of that. And, I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, I don't know why. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And then she says, no, it's all that work you put into it, Lupe. She says, these kids feel that connection with you, that they can come to you in this type of situation. So to me, it's one of the most valued positions I've ever had in law enforcement, one that I will greatly miss.
My only hope is that someday you won't make me call you Officer Martin anymore. Thanks, buddy. Someday I'll be there, right? All right. So feel free to address that relationship building question too. We're just going to move into our last question here. So you can roll that in here. This is just in general. What advice would you give? Let's say you were on a panel in front of a bunch of school safety staff. Just make up a scenario, and you had the opportunity to give them some advice, piece of wisdom on how to better carry out a bias-free job. Right? What advice would you give them? And this will be our last call, so if you have any final comments too, now's your chance.
One really important piece of advice that I will ask you all to take with you today is remember that every interaction that you have with a student or a young person has the potential to turn your relationship with them from stranger to mentor. They have the opportunity to look up to someone like you and say, that is an important person in my life that I can learn from. And here's why. And they'll tell you why. They'll tell you that one time that you made room for them and you sat with them in a really difficult day is the reason that you might be a mentor and is the reason that they will remember you for the rest of their life. So every interaction that you have with a student, a young person, you are taking an opportunity to be their mentor or to be something completely different. So you need to decide what words, what actions you're going to take in order to build that relationship or potentially break it down. Be their mentor.
Thank you.
Like I said prior, is just, continuing the knowledge, continue what it is that you don't know, continue to know something more, especially when it comes to education or mental health, suicide prevention, intervention. Really just stay up to date, even culturally, with the things that the kids are listening or doing now. It doesn't mean we have to like it, but it's good to know about it. What I liked back then isn't what I really like now, but I'm going to learn about it so that way I can have that relationship building when I do work with kids. Just be open. Even when we don't like something, acknowledge that you don't like it, but at least I know about it. At least we can have a conversation about it and be honest with yourself and whoever it is you're working with. Fill in the gaps wherever it's missing, and really try your best to stay in a place of non-judgment. We could still do our jobs and still be non-judgmental. We're doing the job and not the other way around, right? And we really want our kids to feel safe. And in your positions, we either make them feel safe or we don't. And so just acknowledging that sometimes we're going to make mistakes, and when we make mistakes, acknowledge it, because again, it's about allowing people to feel safe that we make mistakes. We're human. We're not perfect. And just because we're in this position that we're in, we still make mistakes. And that's okay. But when we continue to do the same thing over and over again, it's not a mistake anymore. It's on purpose. And so it's really taken a place of just owning up to ourselves so that others, again, can do the same.
Thank you.
So I made it a point to meet with students that were returning to school from a suspension, and I talked to other SROs about it, and before we had a bunch of them, no one really had done that before, and so rather than just talking to the same kids, so the first thing is going out there and actually just talking to students, right? But also making a point to talking to the students that are getting in trouble a lot. Just, have them come to your office or go talk to them and just say, hey, I know that you got suspended for so many days for this, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on at home. And just, again, trying to build that relationship and being consistent and being there for the kids, no matter, if they're the good kids or the bad kids, you've got to build those relationships with everyone. And just trying to get to know all of them. And especially the ones that are hurting, especially the ones that are getting in trouble, because they're the ones that really need you the most.
Thank you.
So as far as what we're doing to build relationships in Grandview, we've started meeting up with City Hall, Public Works, and all school administrators, and we even had a radio station personnel the other day in there, and we're reaching out to all these different communities. And my biggest thing is what I'm starting to look at is our increase in gang activity, and why these kids are starting to choose to outsource their entertainment elsewhere, and what's missing. And so we're working with all these different foundations around to try and bring some different community involvement to some of these kids. And what they're focusing is the time from when they're out of school to the time their parents get back, because again, you have to know your audience. And Grandview, the majority of Grandview is all field workers who are out in the field. They don't really pay attention. Their kids are kind of on their own after 3 o'clock, and so then I'm kind of babysitting them until 3 o'clock, chasing them around, making sure they're not getting into any trouble and things of that nature. But they need something to do. They need different activities and things of that nature. And if they're not going to get that, they need to follow up with, they're going to be following up with students with grades who are, on the verge of dropping out and things of that nature, and try to re-engage with these students again. And so those wheels are now starting to turn, because we don't want to go back to the early 2000s. And I think the other thing is my new SRO that's coming in, I've got this idea in my mind exactly as to how I want to work with him, how I'm going to get him involved with the elementary kids and having lunch with them. He doesn't know this yet, but he's going to be sitting down and having lunch with elementary kids and things of that nature, and we're going to see about getting him back into those classes.
All right, thank you.
I don't fully know exactly how this would work, but I mean, I think you could just pick maybe like they've all said, get to know people. But if you know there's 3 to 5 kids that you just really don't like, I mean, you can make them projects, right? Like, get to know them, talk to them. I don't know, give them a bag of Takis and sit down with them. I don't know if you're allowed to give food out, but like, I think that there are ways to and it doesn't have to be long, positive interactions, but every positive interaction is going to build upon build upon build. And I just think that you focus on those, right? And then be safe, right? And you're safe when you're regular and consistent, and it's the same every day, right? Because these kids are not coming from regular and safe and consistent houses. They're just not, or they wouldn't be having the issues they're having at school. So if you can be that safe place, you can earn their trust. And I would intentionally go after the kids that I had a problem with, right? Because I think once you get to know them, the problem will disappear, right? And that may take a really long time. That may take 7 years, right? That may take years. You may never break them, right? It may be the next person, right? That they had that many positive experiences with you, and then it puts them in a good place for the next person that comes in. And the other thing I would say is this is hard work. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Make sure that you guys are all going to therapy, having regular outlets, right? This is hard. This is hard mentally. To deal with kid in crisis after crisis after crisis. It's hard to have a kid tell you, I was thinking about killing myself. That's hard. That's a hard secret to keep for some kid. Not that you're keeping a secret, but like, it's hard to be that safe place for kids in crisis. And so I would just make sure that you're not burning out, because at that point in time, you're not doing anyone any good, least of all the kids you're serving. So take some time and do what fuels your soul outside of work.
Thank you. Final thoughts?
How can you top that?
You can just say, amen.
Can I get a witness?
All right. All right. Well, I want to thank our panel. Did you have a question, comment? Comment. Okay. Get that man a mic.
Also, just want to say, looking at the title of this topic, I would like to just put it out there also that it's okay to understand that not all biases are bad. And it's okay I think that that's okay to be okay with not all biases are bad. I looked up the definition. So there's pros and there's cons to biases, right? The other thing I think that could help with the bias-free community policing is add the community in there. Empower the community, empower the parents. I think society and the community needs to stop looking specifically at law enforcement to figure out everything. You guys are our tutors, our mentors, our therapists, our protectors, and I think that needs to be divvied up into other aspects of the community as well. And that's a lot on law enforcement's shoulders, is looking at law enforcement as the facilitator and not necessarily the problem solver of everything. So my 2 cents. Thank you for your work too, by the way.
Thanks, Joseph. Love to see the community partnership, and that's why we have the panel the way we do, and appreciate the work you guys are doing to get engaged with the community and reach out and get plugged in. And I've heard the term resources mentioned many times up here, and you don't have to have. That's why we have community groups and why we have them represented up here. So we're going to go ahead and take 5 here just to let you know. I want to say thanks to our panel up here, but we'll go ahead and take 5, and we'll start in 5 short minutes for our next for our final presentation. But thank you, Amanda. Really appreciate you being here today. Taylor, thank you. Dan, appreciate you. Quinn, thank you very much. Dulce and Lupe. All right. So a round of applause for our panelists.